I'm Nick.
And I'm Sasha.
Today we'll be talking about tax concessions for tech startups. So back with the mining boom, I think it was brought to light that as a country we can't just rely on the one industry. And as we all know, technology is the future. You see companies like Google, Apple, all the big dogs, they're thriving and pretty much taking over the world. The government has introduced grants, concessions and programs that encourage Australians to invest and create business through tech. And today we're just going to go through a few of these regarding taxing. It's just going to be a broad overview, as there are quite a few and they do go quite in depth. The main ones we'll be discussing, the R&D offsets as well as Ecig. And Sasha, being our resident guru on R&D, we'll get you to kick us off.
Okay, so the current R&D tax incentive came into existence back in July 2011. The rates that we're currently using changed, so they're the rates from 2016. So the rates that currently are available are a tax offset for 38.5%, which is non-refundable, or a 43.5% refundable tax offset. This is depending on the company's aggregated turnover. So if your turnover is less than 20 million, then you would be entitled to the 43.5% refundable tax offset. Turnover greater than 20 million would be the 38.5% non-refundable tax offset. It's important to note that the non-refundable tax offset can be carried forward to be used in a future year. Say a company's got a loss in the year when they incur the R&D expenditure, they can carry forward their tax offset to be used in the next year when they might have, or hopefully would have, a taxable profit. The minimum spend to access the tax offset is 20,000. That'd be a bit steep. 20,000. Then when your R&D expenditure reaches 100 million, the tax offset is reduced to the corporate tax rate. So a bit about the how you can access the tax offset. First of all, you have to be an eligible R&D entity, which is a string of requirements. Pretty much you have to be incorporated in Australia, or an Australian tax resident company, or you've got a permanent establishment and you're able to carry on business within Australia. So step 2 is you need to register your R&D activities with Industry. So the R&D tax incentive is jointly administered by the ATO and Industry. So what you have to do is submit your form with Industry. Just briefly, you have to go through and detail all of your core activities, your supporting activities, which I'll briefly touch on in a minute. You need to then submit this form, after which you get a letter back from Industry, just saying that your activities have been registered, and then you can go ahead and submit your tax return and claim your tax offset. So what you need to do is split your activities between core and supporting activities. Core activities are pretty much experimenting activities. What, just briefly, they are is activities to generate new knowledge, and then supporting activities that support those. Simply, there are some activities that are specifically excluded from being core activities, and so you can't claim the R&D tax offset for those, so you need to just be aware that there are a few exclusions.
R&D, they say it's self-assessed.
Yes.
But the actual self-assessment, it's not just a simple matter of saying, yeah, I'm eligible for R&D and I'm going to start claiming the incentives now. It's the actual process is quite complex, and you do need to go through a bit of red tape to be eligible.
A bit of red tape, I like that. Thanks, Nick.
I don't think we haven't had a massive amount of clients, as it's a fairly new incentive. We haven't had a massive amount of clients actually come through to claim the R&D tax incentives, but ones we have had, usually it's usually a bit of a group assignment getting it over the line, isn't it?
Because of the depth of knowledge that you need about the client's activities, the experiments that they are performing, I suppose. A lot of detail that's required to go into those ones. So yeah, you're right, you self-assess, you say, I tick all the boxes, I can claim the tax offset, but you do need to then go through quite a big process to then get the little number that you can put in your tax return.
Yeah, it's a minefield, but yeah, obviously that one we could probably go on for hours on that because it is much more complex than the initial sort of introduction seems. But we will move on to the next one. Move on to Ecig.
Okay.
So Ecig it's early stage innovation companies. Pretty much what it is you've got a company that is looking to do something that no other companies within the country or outside have been doing. So it's, I guess, what you would call a risky sort of startup. It's something new, it's something exciting, and it's leading in a direction that we as a nation want to go in. What the government has introduced is no grants, but offsets and concessions for investors in Ecig companies. So if you are an investor that purchases shares from an Ecig company in that Ecig company when they're initially introduced and released, then you tick the boxes for these concessions that have been introduced. The two main concessions there are that you will get a non-refundable carry forward tax offset of up to 20% of the purchase price of those shares, and also that CGT rules are modified. So if you hold those Ecig shares for over a year but under 10 years, then all gains and losses are ignored. The important one to remember there is that losses also are ignored because, obviously,
you want to be able to access your losses.
Yeah, you can't have one without the other, and obviously a lot of these companies are, they're not sure things. A lot of them, while the ones that make it through are great, and we do need these to keep going through, there are a lot that obviously they don't get off the ground, and yeah, so it's important to remember that you do actually disregard the losses as well. For another thing to remember as well is that Ecig shares, to access the concessions, they're actually capped at 50k unless you hold a sophisticated investor's certificate. So if you pass those rules, you can actually exceed the 50k cap, but otherwise for the likes of you and I, we're stuck under 50 grand.
The sophisticated investors, are they still capped?
I don't actually know. I think they are at some point, but I'd have to look into that. It's a good one.
I think it's 200 grand. Yeah, so I think it's $1 million of investment.
That would make sense.
And then the offset is capped at 200,000.
That would make sense. I'd imagine there'd have to be a cap there at some point. So Ecig is pretty much, it's aimed at the investors for the company to actually be eligible to be an Ecig company. There are a couple of tests that need to be passed. Again, these tests can be quite complex depending on the company and the circumstances, but you have to pass the early stage test, and you also need to pass either the 100-point innovation test, which is the easiest test to pass, or the principles-based innovation test. So if you pass two of those, then you will be deemed Ecig as a company, and then the investors that invest in the initial shares, they will have access to these concessions. If down the track the company becomes no longer Ecig, then the investor doesn't actually lose those concessions. So obviously you've got up until 10 years to access those, and they're still counted as Ecig shares if they were ever at any point. Again, we can go into that further, but it'll take forever. So that's Ecig, a very broad overview. There are a couple other offsets and concessions that have been introduced. The Export Market Development Grant, that's pretty much just aimed at encouraging Australian businesses to export and get Australian products out into the wider world. And there's also the Entrepreneurs Program, which is pretty much it's a program aimed at supplying grants and guidance for new entrepreneurs that are starting up new businesses, so helping them thrive and succeed. Those are just a quick couple. There's obviously a lot more we could go through, and we would be happy to go through those in person. So if you do want to learn more, or if you just want to have a chat about it, feel free, call the office, have a chat to Sasha, have a chat to myself. More than happy to help.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sasha.
Thanks very much, Steve.
We'll see you next time.